All right. Technology's taking over, so. All right, did it pop anything up yet? No. Okay, can everybody see the screen there?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Cool. Now I just have to figure out where this beginning is. There we go. And figure out where my notes went. All right, sweet. So food and fitness, two of my favorite things. So I thought this kind of from feedback from people too, but some of the other webinars we've done, this was a common topic of like, well, what do we do if we're pairing food or trying to eat as well around our exercise program as possible? And as I started kind of researching how to make this into a presentation, it got a little more challenging because it kind of depends on what you're doing for your exercise. So we're going to kind of gear it for more like strength training, muscle building, which is something we should all probably try to get a little bit more muscle as we age, and just makes us healthier metabolically in general. But what I want to do with this, kind of like I was explaining, is just answer a lot of questions too. I mean, we'll have time at the end for a Q&A, of course, but if you have questions along the way, just kind of do the raise your hand thing, and then we'll try to address them along the way too. So today's presentation, who am I? A little overview. I'll give you a quick little snippet of that, just so you know who's chit-chatting here in case we've never met. And then we'll go over the principles of exercise, more specifically for like increasing muscle. And not saying that we're doing this as like bodybuilders, but putting on muscle, you know, becomes pretty challenging, especially as you get older. So that's really why I geared it a little bit more specifically to this. And then we'll talk about the principles specifically nutrition-wise for supporting that and increasing muscle. And then I made just like a basic little template. I'll kind of show you how that works. You know, there'll probably be another technology challenge for me, but hopefully I can figure that out. And then we'll talk about a little coaching offer, and then we'll do a Q&A after that. Hopefully answer a bunch of questions. So have some good ones, I'm sure. So I'm a information junkie in general, but having said that, I kind of just have a few things up here about myself. I'm an orthopedic occupational therapist, certified nutrition coach through a bunch of different avenues, as well as a certified strength conditioning coach through a bunch of different avenues. You know, movement and exercise have always been a part of my life, and like to push myself and kind of see what my body can do. I have 3 teenagers, which is crazy as I get old here, getting ready to go to college pretty soon, which is scary. But played tennis in college, got out, started doing triathlons. I've had to try, you know, the hardest stuff I could. So did some Ironmans, did the World Championships back in 2003 in Hawaii. Then got into more cycling, then CrossFit. And that's where I really started realizing the importance of strength and movement a little bit more versus just like pushing my body. Now I, you know, do a lot more cycling, weightlifting, CrossFit, some golf in there too. But let's talk about why I started Nutrition First Coaching. And it's really because everything in my life gears around coaching for me. Working with people at work, doing rehab with them, coaching them, coaching at the gym I used to own. You know, coaching's always kind of that component for me. And the biggest thing I noticed, kind of like the little triangle on the right, is like nutrition. Nutrition's always that missing link, so to speak. And it's always the base of the triangle. And there's so much misinformation out there. It seems like just sifting through that is always a massive challenge. So, hey, Jennifer, could you mute and Shannon, could you guys mute your mics? Then that way maybe we won't have any noises. Thanks.
With my
technology challenges. If you're asking me how to do it, I can't tell you. It's just like on my screen.
I'm just on my iPad.
Oh, I see. Anybody got any answers for that?
Okay. No.
On my iPad, it's just at the bottom of the screen. You just hit the microphone.
Oh yeah, if there's
At
like
the
a
bottom
little
of,
mic.
okay, I'm on my tab. And then I'll still be able to hear
Ooh.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll still be able to hear me. I just can't hear you. So then that way it's not like feedback and stuff. And then if you have questions, you just unmic it or unmute it, and then you can ask a question too. But we'll kind of address that as we get closer.
I don't see a microphone, but you keep going, and I'll keep looking for that.
Okay. So today I really want to talk a lot about just the principles around exercise and nutrition, try to kind of bust up some of the myths. And, you know, it's almost impossible to cover all this quickly. That's why I wanted to make this a big Q&A for the most part. So hopefully a lot of people can ask questions, and then that might help other people with their questions. And we can kind of, you know, come up with some, you know, cool scenarios or common scenarios too. So let's talk a little bit about kind of general training principles here. And I had in my notes here just to keep talking about, like, hey, if you have questions, log in. So strength training principles. This is what they're based on in general, and then we'll go into them a little more specific, but I didn't want it to be too dry and be like, hey, here's a bunch of science about strength training stuff, which I wanted to make it more applicable to like what you're actually doing. So, I mean, it really has to do with how our bodies get stressed by exercise and movement, how they adapt to that, and then how we improve from what we are doing in our training, you know, and that's how we get stronger, faster, more flexible, you know, more resilient as people in general. And then, you know, I say it's kind of the roadmap to changing our body how we want, because once you understand these basic physical systems, and you can just manage those systems, and it keeps you from plateauing or getting injured, you know, or having problems along the way. It gives us, well, it helps us get the most out of our body and our genetics. You know, it's not magic, but if we're doing it relatively correctly, or with somebody that, you know, can supervise us or give us a correct program and give us some feedback, then, you know, that's where you just have to put the work in and your body will respond to it. And that's the nice thing. It's, our bodies are like obedient dogs. They just do what we tell them to. So whether it's good or bad, and then that helps us in the long term. So that can help us, you know, manage aging and normal muscle loss, which just happens as we age, because, you know, hopefully the long-term goal with everything is, you know, being badasses into our 60s, 70s, and 80s, and being those cool grandparents or great grandparents, and getting to be involved in our kids' and grandkids' lives. So that's why muscle. It's not so much like, oh, I want to be huge and muscular, which that's kind of fun too, but I want to be functional and have muscle, and muscle is very important metabolically. The basis of all the physical goals we have comes down to muscle and movement and strength and just how our bodies work. And then, you know, lastly, I just say, like, these principles, as long as they're being used well in a good program, have to stick to some of these basic things. So if you're looking at these fad programs or something off the internet and somebody doesn't know what they're talking about, I mean, things can go wrong, or you'll just, you know, hopefully at the least make no progress with something too. So you just always got to be a little bit careful of some of the stuff you read on the internet. It's not all true, I promise. All right, so this is our hierarchy of muscle and strength building. So this is a pretty cool pyramid. This is from Eric Helms. He gave me permission because I read all his stuff, so I figured I've given him enough money that I could use this in my presentation. So this is basically showing us how, in this pyramid situation, if you don't have adherence to something and you don't follow these levels, then you're going to plateau or possibly even get injured. You know, if we look at level 1 and level 2, if we can adhere to the program and we can kind of follow the principles of volume, intensity, and frequency, then, you know, that's a huge chunk of any good program, no matter what our goals are. If it's building muscle, if it's running a 10K, you know, if it's just staying in shape and staying flexible, you know, that's where the volume, intensity, and frequency kind of come in. And if we're talking about weights, intensity can be anything from the amount of weight we're lifting, how quickly we're lifting it, frequency of lifting it. It kind of comes down to all those little variables being manipulated. And the higher the intensity, usually the better the results, but that comes to a point of a breaking point where if you're doing stuff too much, too frequently, too heavy, of course, injuries can come in. So, it's always that variable that gets you the results the quickest, but it's very potent. So you have to be careful not to abuse it, so to speak. And that's where, some kind of strength and conditioning or fitness professional comes in too, because they can design programs for you. And that's my kind of general advocacy for having somebody that knows what they're doing help you out versus just some bro at the gym being like, oh man, you need to lift weights like this. You're doing that wrong. You got to do it like this. And, that's probably when that guy knows nothing about what he's saying. So probably avoid that person. But if you're hitting the first two, then progressing things, exercise selection, how much you rest, and the tempo of the movements, all that stuff becomes pretty minute when it comes down to the movement principles in general. So the overview of these principles, and these 6 principles I kind of picked out as the most important ones, and there's a few others that I thought was just like, okay, those are way too minute to even really think about for something like this. But the first one is specificity. So your training needs to reflect what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to put on muscle, you probably need to do some resistance training and weightlifting. If you're trying to run a marathon, you probably need to do more running. It's kind of back to that old adage of like, hey, you want to get better at doing pull-ups? Well, you should probably do some pull-ups and work towards a progression of doing pull-ups. So that's where that specificity comes in. If it's what you want to achieve, you need to do more of that. It just comes in a kind of potentiated manner of how you have to progress into it. And then the next principle, which definitely has to do a lot with getting stronger, is the overload principle. So something needs to be progressively more challenging. And if it isn't, you're going to hit this point where your body just adapts to it. And that's what exercise is. Your body's trying to adapt to it. It's trying to make something easier, whether it's lifting a weight, and as you get stronger, that gets easier, or whether it's running and it's cardiovascular endurance. It's just trying to get back to that little homeostatic set point. So it's trying to make it easier. And that's really what exercise is stressing your body and letting it recover. And that's where fatigue management comes in. So you have to be careful about how frequently you exercise, how hard you exercise, and manage that fatigue. Because if you're not managing the fatigue correctly, then that's where things can kind of go wrong. You either aren't recovering enough, you're not allowing those adaptations to occur, and that kind of leads into the stress recovery adaptation cycle with how exercise works. There's kind of 2 distinct physiological times for adaptations to happen. One is when you're actively disrupting everything in the system, which is exercise. And we all think that exercise is when all the great stuff happens. It's actually when the bad stuff happens and we're kind of injuring ourselves, so to speak. We're stressing ourselves. And then when things actually get better, that's the second physiological adaptation. That part is when we're actively recovering. And that happens with sleep, that happens with nutrition, and you're gaining all those things from exercise in those time frames, granted you are supporting it correctly with nutrition. So that's a big misnomer that if you just exercise more and more and more, then you're going to get more fit, but you need that stress adaptation recovery to happen. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of keep breaking yourself down. Then the variation comes in, and that's where just changing up the exercise in this kind of manner where you periodize it throughout the year or for what you're doing, that can not only keep you from getting bored, but it'll actually keep your body from plateauing. And then you just have to individualize it to who you are, to yourself. And this is, again, where, a qualified professional can help a lot, because they can design it just for you and whatever your goals are, and then make the adjustments along the way. So that individualization is where I think the really interesting stuff can happen with exercise and those principles. So principle order matters for sure. Specificity, this kind of goes to, I think is a kind of a funny example, but it's like, if you want to run a marathon and your program doesn't have you doing any running and only lifting weights, you're not really doing the right program. You're doing the wrong program completely, and there's no specificity to that program, and you're not going to do very well in your marathon. So there has to be specificity to start with, and that's the most important one. That's basically directing you and where you want to go for your goal. And then the next step always has to be the overload part, and whether that's running more, running faster, lifting more weights, you name it, the overload part is what is progressively going to keep making us better. And then, lastly, to really oversimplify these guys, it's like individualization. So what exactly do you want? And that's one of the first things we do with nutrition coaching and any kind of exercise program is, what are your goals? And then what are the behaviors we need to do to reach those goals? And then that's how we figure out what it is exactly that's going to be right for you and your program. And there I mentioned a little bit with training age, and that has to do with how long you've been doing a certain activity and kind of what you can tolerate. And that gets back to some of the other principles as well. So the overarching theme to exercise is something called periodization. And basically what that means is the ebb and flow of your program, daily, weekly, monthly, throughout the year and the seasons. And what you're trying to do with that is make sure that you are recovering correctly and that you're hitting these little peak phases, and then you can kind of overcome some of those, what we call super compensation can happen, and you can kind of overcome that. And then that'll help you progress towards your goals, and goals are important because otherwise you're just exercising to exercise. And I don't really know, that gets boring. People struggle to do that. And that's when you have to drag yourself to the gym or to do exercise. And periodization just equals the application of all the training principles put together in, this kind of fancy term, phase potentiated manner, which basically just means they're in the correct order. So that goes back to kind of our pyramid. They just have to happen in that order for things to keep progressing. So I put this together just to give you like a little quick, kind of, this is how the overload and specificity principles can kind of work together. And if you're looking at it, first you're going to say you're trying to build some muscle. So the first thing you're going to look at is how much weight you're going to lift, and then what your rep range is going to focus on. So if you're trying to make your muscles bigger, usually you want to get around that 5 minimum to up to 10 or so reps. If you're trying to just get stronger, the reps are a little lower because the resistance is going to be a little higher. And then if you're trying to get max strength, now you're doing low reps with lots of resistance. But then you need to decide, okay, how many sets to stimulate the overload. And if you're a very beginner with weightlifting, that might be 1 set of something, 2 at the most. Like, the good thing that maybe came out of this whole pandemic with my kids and the family is, like, we got the boys going to the gym now, and the first thing my son said to me is like, I don't want to get too sore. I don't want to go to the gym because I get too sore. So literally the first 2 or 3 weeks we'd go and do 1 set of an exercise, and we'd do like 5 exercises, and then he'd walk on the treadmill for a while. And I was like, okay, you didn't get sore, but it's starting to get his body primed to lift more and kind of stimulate that overload principle. So depending on your training age, like how long you've been doing it, that's where you need to figure out kind of what's the right amount of overload. And then beginning wise, I like to use 1 of 2 scales, either like a rate of perceived exertion. So you can say 7 out of 10 would roughly be 70% of your effort level, or you can do something called reps in reserve, where if you're lifting a certain weight, say you're doing some squats, and we say you want to try to do 10 reps with a 3 reps in reserve, that would mean you get to 10, and you could do 3 more if you really needed to before you just fail and drop the weight, but you're going to stop at 10. And that's a pretty good way to just kind of get in touch with your ability to lift and kind of how you feel, and then know those kind of target ranges. And that's 3 reps in reserve is a good way to say that's like right in your 70-75% of your 1 rep max, without having to go to that 1 rep max and find that failure point, which is, can be dangerous, of course, without the right spotting and technique. Then you just pick your rep ranges and you go for it with that RPE or that RIR in mind. And then I always tell people, write stuff down, know what you're doing, have a little log, kind of know what's going on in terms of your exercise and how your body's changing and what you've been doing. And that kind of leads to the next slide here, which everybody should have got this. This is, I just put it into a PDF form and took a picture of it because that's about the skills of my computer savviness. But you should have got this as like a copy. And you can make a copy of it. It's just a little template that's on a spreadsheet. And it's kind of cool because you can just put in what you need for your own exercises. So this is going to challenge me, I'm sure, but we're going to try to switch tabs here. Coming out of that one, let's see here. Tab. All right, maybe that's working. So this is what your little template will look like, and because it's on the spreadsheet, what you can do is you just go in and you can say, okay, so the exercise I want to select for my first exercise is going to be a back squat. And then you can decide which one of these rep ranges you want to do. If you're like, okay, today I'm going to do 4 different exercises, and I'm going to do 3 sets of each exercise in the 8 to 10 rep range. Then you just have to put your 4 exercises here. It could be back squat, shoulder press, down to 4 different exercises. Oh, sorry, that says upper body strength. So we're not doing back squat there. Say we're doing shoulder press, bicep curls, and maybe some upper body rowing exercises. Then you can go to the lower body, do the same thing, put the exercises you want in there, pick your rep ranges. Remember, like 8 to 10 is kind of that hypertrophy, grow some muscle. Anything 12 to 15 is more endurance based. And I just went as low as 6 reps, unless you're working. And you could always go in and change the reps on there too, once this is your own copy. That gives you the exercises, and then you can go in and have your sets and rep ranges. Here where I put intervals, you could put in a couple different exercises for this, and you could make this, say your first one's going to be, let's say mountain climbers. And maybe your second one is going to be jumping jacks. We'll go old school. So here you could say, okay, my work time is going to be 30 seconds, and then my rest time is going to be 15 seconds, and I'm going to do 8 rounds of that. So you go here and do your mountain climbers and your jumping jacks, and you do them for 30 seconds, rest 15. Do your jumping jacks, 30 seconds, rest 15. So now we're getting some of these little interval sets. So I kind of put these together as like a 2-to-1 work to rest ratio kind of thing. Then you go down here to like a little core abs finisher one, and say your total working time's 3 minutes. And then you could put in 2 or 3 different ab exercises and just rotate through those. That way you're getting a little bit of kind of cardiovascular stuff in the intervals. You're getting the abs in the finisher, and you can do upper body, lower body strengthening type of stuff. So that's how that should work. Let's go back to the presentation here. See if I can figure this out again. All right, here we go. Okay, so overview of our principles here. Oh, sorry, we skipped on to, so that was our template. Now we're on to our nutrition principles overview. So nutrition wise, just like exercise, there's basic principles to stick to. We're going to gear the nutrition based on supporting muscle growth and just exercise recovery. So no matter you look at it, like calories are always king. Calories are always first. If you're taking in too many calories, then you're burning, then you're probably going to gain weight. If you're not taking in enough calories as much energy as you're expending, then you're going to lose weight. It's really that simple. mean, granted, there's a lot of other things that go into health and building healthy tissues and supporting your body, but you can eat, like literally they've done a study, and you can eat sugar and beef jerky, and as long as you're under your calories, you're going to lose weight. So that's crazy. I don't recommend it, but if you're under your calories, you're going to lose weight more, you're going to gain weight. It's relatively simple in regards to that. But of course the macronutrients matter. That's your next big one. How much carbs are you getting, how much fat, how much protein, and that is going to determine a lot your just composition of your body in general. So yes, macros are very important, especially for gaining muscle and improving performance. And that's what we concentrate a lot on when we design some of our nutrition programs for people, is what do they need for their split of their different macronutrients. And then we get into, the other 20%, which honestly, calories and macros are the 80%. The 20% left is timing, like when you eat your food. Do you fast for 23 hours a day and then eat all your food in an hour? Or do you eat 3 different meals? Do you eat at 6 a.m. and you're eating all day until 11 o'clock at night, so your body's never not eating? That's not nearly as important as if you stay under your calorie budget, then you're going to lose weight. So the last few being the composition of your food. And this is where, if you're covering your macros, you're going to be getting a good amount of fiber, phytonutrients, the micronutrients, all the little things you need. And then supplements are the micro part of everything, but they're the big one that we see everything pushed on the internet, Instagram. Everything else is always like, oh, you got to try this supplement, it's going to change your life. All you got to do is take a pill, and that's what we all, have probably tried in the past, and it just doesn't work. And then the interesting thing with that is the consistency underlies everything. Just like your strength conditioning program or your exercise program, if you can't follow it and you're not consistent with it, it's not going to work. But if you can follow it and be consistent, you're good. And this is where, this is from RP. They're a pretty cool company. I follow a lot of their stuff, and they kind of broke it down in this little infographic. It's calorie balance first and macros next. And that's really 80% of what's going to get you to where you want to be goal wise. Then we get into all the little tiny stuff around it, which is your nutrient timing, your food composition, and then that tiny little bar of supplementation. Then everything is kind of supported by the fact that you need to be consistent. And, the best diet for you, or the best nutrition plan for you, is the one you can stick to, the one you can make a lifestyle, and you can design your life and habits around it. This is really more geared for building muscle and strength. So I like how they kind of use this at the bottom and said behavior and lifestyle supports all these layers and levels of the pyramid. This is again from Eric Helms and some of his work, and it's really about energy balance. So that's the whole calories in, calories out equation. And, I like to use it as a budget, kind of that analogy of a budget. So it's just like a financial budget you have. If you overspend on that budget, you start to rack up debt. That debt becomes exponentially harder to get rid of. And pretty soon you're struggling and buried in debt. That's kind of the same way. If you keep that energy balance off and you're putting on weight, eventually you put on more weight. Pretty soon it's hard to get rid of that. Then you start having health problems. And then it's like, okay, blood pressure issues, metabolic problems, blood sugar problems, all the kind of diseases of adulthood start to take over. You've accumulated that debt and you have to kind of dig your way out of it. And if the energy balance is right and you're doing well with your macronutrients and you're getting some carbs, fats, and protein, and they're healthy sources, that's going to cover most of the other stuff. The micronutrients are going to fall into place. And then again, the timing and supplements is just not that big a deal, in all honesty. But as you dial in your goals a little bit more, some of those things can matter a little bit more too. But for the majority of the population, level 1, 2, and maybe 3, from there, it doesn't really make a huge difference. So summary of nutrition and exercise. If you're trying to lose weight, focus on calorie deficit. Keep your protein intake high. And as you consistently perform effective resistance training programs, then you're going to build muscle and you're going to be losing weight. And as you get closer and closer to kind of your ideal body composition, that's when you can start playing with some of those other variables. Calorie restriction isn't necessary for the most part if your nutrition is supporting your lifestyle and you're building muscle, and your body's going to be a little bit more what we call metabolically flexible, and it's going to have that ability to kind of absorb things through the muscle because it's such amazing tissue and expensive tissue in our body. It can afford us to do, maybe not be quite as dialed in with some stuff. And then what you do in your exercise program and how you perform the exercises, number of reps, amount of resistance, number of exercises, all the things we kind of talked about in that little spreadsheet too, is that's where your nutrition needs to be effective to support that. And if it is, then it's going to support growing muscle, being healthy, and being metabolically very fit. If you need to know, so this is where I always go back to with everything. Where you're at now and where you want to be, you need to know those two things, and sometimes that's the bitter truth of where you're at now. It's not only how much do I weigh on the scale, it's taking pictures and looking at your body composition and how things hang and look, and getting an in-body scan and knowing the composition of how much body fat you have and how much muscle you have. And, you got to know where you're starting from, and then that's going to help you figure out where you want to get to and how to support those goals and the behaviors you need to do along the way. And then, exercise is important, but nutrition's the key. And without it, you're always going to struggle in terms of reaching goals if your nutrition's never in place. Everybody's probably heard the saying of you can't out-exercise a bad diet, and that's very true. Eventually, it's going to catch up to you. So that kind of wraps up, presentation-wise. Of course, there's always going to be a coaching special because I get to plug a little bit of my company and my program. But this is one I put together mainly for the reason of years of coaching, talking to people, seeing what everybody needs in terms of like all the components. And what it comes down to is figuring out what nutrition's right for them, getting them to a healthy body composition, helping them achieve their goals, but also putting in place those other three pillars of movement and exercise. And that's where I feel like I can help people with actually doing a movement assessment with them in person, offering a personal training session once a month, and then designing a program for them. And that's why I put together this kind of VIP coaching package, because it incorporates all those things together, and not only will be the most effective thing, but the most long-term lifestyle changing program. So if anybody's interested in this type of program, I always offer, and this goes for any of my coaching, I offer a free discovery call. We can talk about it, see if it's right for you. It requires a commitment, but it also requires, financial commitment, obviously, but a commitment to yourself and that you want to improve and you want to make yourself healthier, and you want to, kind of whatever that goal is. You want to see your grandkids, you want to play with your kids now, you want to lose the dad bod, or, whatever has happened in life. We know all those things happen. But I offer a free discovery call where we can talk about all that stuff. We can kind of lay it out for you and exactly what would be best for you. And that also comes with just like general nutrition coaching. And this is, still excellent accountability. And I'm going to give you a lot of the things you get with the VIP plan, just not the in-person stuff and not the specific program design, but you get all these things you see on the screen and then some. And that's, something that always makes, always gets people to their goals. It's just a matter of how long and the commitment level, and it's, to me, we get a lot of people that have tried other things and they just struggle with them and struggle. And then they finally give up on, Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers or you name it, somebody at the gym helping them or whatever. But, to me, it comes down to like changing the lifestyle, changing the behaviors and habits, getting the nutrition right, and all that's inner work and mindset, and that comes with all our programs. But this is our kind of general nutrition coaching program, and that's why we ask for like a minimum of 3 months, and really usually takes longer than, significantly longer than that to really make long-term lifestyle changes. But that's the end of the presentation. Appreciate everybody listening. Now let's talk about you. What kind of questions we got? So anything nutrition based, anything exercise based, combination of each one. If you want to just unmute your mic and then ask the question, then everybody can hear, and we can, hopefully answer. People are going to have similar questions, I would assume. So fire away. Let's ask some questions here.
I have a question. This is Angie.
Okay. Hey, Angie.
Hey. Okay. So I've been working out a lot. It's mostly the gym I go to. It's like boot camp style, the high interval intensity training, whatever, high intensity. Yeah. So, so do you change your calories the days you work out compared to the days you don't? That's my biggest question.
It depends where you're at. So if you're at your,
my goal is to lose weight.
Okay. So then I would say no, because I tell people to look at it like bonus calories burned if they're exercising, and it's really for losing weight and kind of general health, kind of like you're doing at your gym. As you get closer to, or you hit your body composition goal, and then it becomes about something else, maybe it's performance or even putting on more muscle or something like that, then we might do things where we cycle calories or even cycle carbs on different days when you're working out, because you might need a little bit more to support you on those days. Something that I think is applicable to that question too is, like, I have a lot of people use MyFitnessPal, and it automatically adjusts, like, oh, you burn this many calories exercising.
That's exactly why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
Because of MyFitnessPal.
And that's an annoying part of MyFitnessPal.
Very annoying.
I don't know if you can turn it off. I should probably figure that out, but I would ignore that part, and I would just do like where you're at, assuming that you have like caloric numbers and macros you're trying to hit. I would just hit those on the days you work out, or the days you have rest days on, and kind of use it as just that steady everyday calorie type of thing, versus adjusting, which becomes pretty complicated too, versus adjusting things and allowing for more calories or more carbs. If somebody is working with me and we're doing weight loss, I'll typically work them into 3 days minimum, and then up to 6 days of a calorie deficit, and then 1 day of like a maintenance calorie day, just because it helps your body try not to adapt metabolically, which is just a fancy way of saying, like, your body's trying to get comfortable with how many calories it's getting. And if you just keep reducing calories, it's going to keep adjusting. And that's where you can get in this fight of, like, you're eating 800 calories a day and you're not losing weight. It's like, well, your body's way too smart to just keep losing calories. It has too many backup mechanisms to try to keep it from starving. So that's where you need to kind of cycle the calories back up, get to some maintenance, and then go back down into a calorie deficit. But, that's a little bit off the topic, but I would ignore MyFitnessPal. I would stick with your normal calories every day, monitor all those things that you're losing weight, you're weighing yourself on the scale, maybe you're having some kind of in-body scans or some kind of testing done. It can be photos, it can be tape measurements, but just kind of monitoring that you're going in the right direction for your goals. And then once you get closer to your goal, then you can start playing with, like, oh, I want to perform better. Maybe I need a few more carbs around my workout, or I want to put on some muscle. So now I'm going to have a little more protein, and I'm going to up my calories a little bit when I lift weights. But if you're in the weight loss phase, I would ignore the calorie deficit stuff or the calorie alterations of MyFitnessPal.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Good question. I like that one. Anybody else? Hmm.
And you know,
Awkward.
so
Oh,
I know. Well, I'll have one more. 'Cause
okay.
Since you're talking, I guess I don't have my video on, so you're just talking to nobody.
Oh,
So
hey.
okay, so if you're if I'm understanding correctly, with the way you in your presentation is the intermittent fasting, all those things are not as big of a difference that I shouldn't stress about, because I just feel like I have there's too much information out there. Everyone
Yeah.
tells you something different. And so I just need to worry about the calorie intake and burning. Like, it just needs to simplify, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It goes back to that. I love this saying for a reason, but I think it's applicable across a lot of different things. And that is that, there's few principles, but there's lots of methods. And principles never change, but methods always do. And the methods are intermittent fasting and keto and Whole30 and paleo and all these different things. Those are all just methods within the principles of nutrition. And the main principle is calorie deficit. If you're trying to lose weight, calories in, calories out. And then you just got to make sure, like, hey, you're getting adequate amount of protein, carbs, and fats. Some people are going to do better with less carbs and more fat, and some people are going to do better with more carbs and less fat. Protein's always kind of the staple. I always tell people the bare minimum is about 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So if you're a 100-pound person, you should be getting 70 grams of protein a day. And that's just for basic health. 0.7 per pound of grams per pound of body weight. So that's kind of like your baseline of like healthy amounts of protein, because in all honesty, the majority of our protein intake goes to maintaining our joints and fixing all the daily wear and tear on our body, and keeping our vision healthy and growing our nails and our hair and repairing cuts on our skin and all that stuff. Not a whole lot of it goes to like building muscle. So if we're in too much of a protein deficit, at some point our body's going to be like, well, all the protein's got to go to fixing all the damage to our body. And that's when we can start to lose muscle, when we're trying to lose weight. And, we don't want that. We want to maintain as much muscle as we can as we're in that calorie deficit. So like 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. And then that can go all the way up to like 1.5 if you're a pretty muscular person and you're trying to put on more muscle, or you're doing something specific, long distance running or some kind of more extreme sport type of stuff.
I have a question if she's done.
Yeah.
So in my job, which is crazy, and I'm trying to lose weight, but I know that you said like the consistency part of working out, and it's so hard to do that. Because like when I'm on the road and stuff, all the hotels and stuff, not the gyms are open. You can only walk up and down the aisle so many times. So if I'm trying to lose weight, is it more important to balance the nutrition when you can't work out consistently, or it's just not going to work if you can't work out consistently? I can only do so much in my room.
Yeah. No, I think I understand what you're saying. And it always comes down to nutrition. So if you can't exercise at all and you sit in Google Meets, I mean, I know what you do, Shannon. She's all over the place because she works for the airline. So she's traveling a lot and in hotels a lot. But if you couldn't even move and you sat in a chair all day and you were on the computer doing, Google Meets and Zoom calls and all that, if you control your nutrition and your calories are balanced to how much energy you expend, or if you want to lose weight, you're in a deficit to how much energy you expend, you'll lose weight. But the other lever to pull is you're doing some kind of exercise program, and then you're burning more calories and you're building muscle, which is really metabolically expensive. So it takes more energy to maintain muscle. And that's where, exercise can kind of exponentially improve weight loss. And having said that, it gets back to no matter what you do, like body weight exercise is still helpful. I mean, one of my favorite exercise kind of workouts, we were just snowboarding and we had no equipment. So we were at our Airbnb and I just set a clock for 30 minutes and it beeped every minute. First minute, I did 15 push-ups. Second minute, I did like 30 seconds of some kind of core move. Third minute, I mean, you can do whatever you want in this one. I did air squats. And it's like I just cycled through those 3 movements for 30 minutes and all body weight, but I was sweating pretty good by the end. You know, I mean, the muscles are working hard. And that's where that intensity factor comes in. You just compress the time frame and you can make that workout pretty intense. I mean, one of my favorite workouts is what we call that EMOM. So every minute on the minute, you're going to do something. You know, maybe it's 30 seconds of ab work and then you get 30 seconds of rest. And the next minute pops up and you're like, okay, I'm going to do mountain climbers for 30 seconds and then rest for 30 seconds. And the next minute pops up and you're like, okay, I'm going to do, you know, push-ups for 30 seconds. But that way you're just compressing that time frame and that increases the intensity, even if you can't increase the intensity of weight or you know, temperature or duration of the workout. You know, all those things can kind of be compressed into a workout and that will up the intensity of the workout. And, you know, that can produce some results. I'm not saying that's the most exciting workout out there, but it's efficient when you don't have any equipment.
Yeah, you gotta have access to a gym, yeah.
But good question.
Okay.
Good question about the exercise and nutrition because, yeah, I don't want you to think like, oh, I can't exercise, so I'm ordering pizza. You know, it's like, screw it, I'm done. Can't exercise. Nutrition's out the window. So,
Yeah. Well, it's hard to eat healthy too on a schedule like that, too, like on the road. So that's hard. I feel like it's a struggle both ways, nutrition and exercise wise. So
well,
that's hard.
and I think depending on your schedule too, this is where some of the methods can come into play that might work a little bit more efficiently for you. So maybe you do better if you do some intermittent fasting because you know you're always traveling between 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. So it's easier to just not eat during those times and you drink water and you stay hydrated and that becomes like an intermittent fasting period. And then you can have, you know, kind of a late lunch and then have dinner normally and you can control that part of your nutrition a little bit better. You know, that's where when we work with people, we start talking to them about like, well, what's your schedule look like exactly? And then, you know, when can you like fit these things in? Or, you know, maybe this would work better if you just eliminate breakfast. Then not only do you not have to think about it, you don't have to be like, oh, I got to get these, you know, I'm trying to get these egg bites from Starbucks and how many calories are these? And, you know, you're just like, I'm just not going to eat breakfast and I'll, you know, budget my calories to lunch and dinner, or maybe even just dinner, or, you know, kind of however it fits into your lifestyle. And that's where those methods can come in and be more effective within the principles, because you're still within that calorie balance. You're still trying to get your macros in, but you can use that method to kind of fit your lifestyle a little bit more efficiently.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? Some good ones.
I have Cheryl here with me. Do you have any questions, Cheryl?
Hi. No.
Okay.
Oh, Becca, are you trying to ask a question? I can't hear you. I think you're still muted. Yeah, you are. There you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. No, I was just saying piggybacking off what you were just talking about, the timing, the nutritional timing.
Mm-hmm.
So what's best? I mean, obviously, like you said, your schedule is best, but you know, isn't it better to eat earlier in the day, or does that really matter?
You know, they've done studies on that too, and it doesn't matter. I mean, when it comes to composition, it doesn't matter. But when it comes to health and longevity, which is really more my obsession of some of this stuff too, is then it does matter, because your body is producing hormones at different times of the day, and that can affect how you digest and how you assimilate blood sugar and insulin. So it actually typically works out well for people if they have a relatively normal day to eat a little bit more for breakfast, a little less for lunch, and then kind of eat the least amount of food at dinner. And what I always try to get people to understand too, because this starts to help with digestion and it starts to help with your body having that ability to kind of rest and digest, is you want some period where you're not digesting food. You know, I mean, ideally you stop eating by 7 at night or so, if you're going to eat breakfast at 7 a.m. the next day. And then it's like a kind of built-in 12-hour window of a little bit of fasting, which fasting just means you're not eating. And that gives your body some time to break down the food and kind of concentrate on repairing things and kind of that rest and digest. But there's also a saying too that you should eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a commoner, dinner like a pauper. And basically what that's saying is like, you're going to burn more calories if you eat more in the morning, because then you're moving around more and you have the ability to kind of work the calories off, so to speak. But kind of give you an opposite scenario, that like first thing I do when I get up is work out. Like literally I might get up at 5:30 in the morning and be working out at 5:45. And so I usually eat more of my carbs and concentrate a lot of stuff in the evening so that my body can be fueled for my morning workout. And so that's going to make me feel better when I'm working out that early and I don't eat something beforehand. But in general, if it's about body composition, it doesn't matter. It's still that calorie balance. But if it's about health and longevity, try to give yourself a little time, a little fasting time. There's a lot of experts out there that say, you know, you should do some amount of fasting once a quarter, you know, a 24, 36, 48-hour fast, water only, with a little bit of electrolytes. And, you know, some of that's a mental game and some of that's just seeing if you can do it. But then it is a really interesting feeling to fast for longer extended periods of time. It's what happens to your body and things that go on in your head and all those things too. So, I mean, there's different reasons for that and not eating, but good question. Like, you know, in general, it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it might cause you some like indigestion if you eat at 10 o'clock at night and then go right to bed. So if it's going to disturb your sleep, it's probably not the best thing either. So, but good question on the timing part. And the timing really, when we're referring to it in the presentation too, I'm talking more about like timing more carbohydrates around a workout to kind of fuel your workout and replenish muscle glycogen. And then that goes down to what you're doing too. Like what Angie was talking about, if it's a higher intensity workout, then you need more carbohydrates. You need your muscles to be full of glycogen and have a little blood sugar going. So that's where carbohydrates are usually better. But if you're eating a really pretty well-balanced meal, or well-balanced day, then when it comes to work out at 4 p.m, you're going to be fine. Like you don't need to have 500 grams of carbs right before you work out at that point, because you've had it kind of going all day and it's already in your system and you have kind of energy flowing through your blood, so to speak. But if you're doing it fasted in the morning, you might need a little like something to sip on, and that might give you a little carbohydrate and make you feel a little bit better. And that's really what we're talking about more with the timing. When we get more into the weeds of that too, is like, if you can kind of time your carbohydrates even after your workout, your body's a little bit more receptive to taking the carbohydrates in. Your blood sugar is usually more stable. And then it makes you replenish the glycogen you used in your workout. And it's kind of that little magic window after you work out where your body can take in more calories, and carbs and protein are the keys at that point. But other than that, I mean, if you're just the everyday person, works out, 45 minutes to an hour, 4 to 5 days a week, most of that stuff doesn't matter, especially the timing. Any questions from Texas there, Catherine? Or we had a question from North Carolina, Kansas City.
I think you covered everything, so.
All right. Well, what else do you like? What would be another good webinar? And maybe this will be our exit interview here. Would you guys like stuff that's more just like specifically geared towards nutrition? I mean, they could do something on like, myths and principles of nutrition in general, and kind of do something that dispels that kind of stuff. I do little videos every Wednesday on that, where I take a whiteboard and I write down whatever I'm talking about and kind of break stuff down, like we were saying, like how much protein you actually need and how much protein supports certain things. And
I mean, I would like to hear more about exercise, honestly, because I'm getting to the point. I know I talked to Jamie and she felt the same way, where the level of intensity of the workouts that I've been doing, I'm like, I might be getting a little old for being sore all the time.
yeah.
So there's this new gym. I don't know if you have it in New Mexico. It's called Spenga. Have you heard of
Oh,
that?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So the concept is you do spin, weightlifting, and yoga every time. So it's like an hour long. You do 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. And I was like, I don't know, that sounds kind of cool, but it would, to your point, be very repetitive, right? You'd be going and doing the same thing over and over and over again. But I like the idea of the yoga at the end every time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what kind of exercise as we're getting a little older.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting, like just anecdotally of myself, like as I've gotten older, because I used to do like ridiculous amounts of volume of exercise. And what I found is like I need more recovery in between exercises. And if the intensity is a lot higher, that's where I'm like, you know, in my 20s and even 30s, I could go do, 100 miles on the bike. And the next day I was like, oh, I can go run, for 2 hours. I'd die if I had to do that now. I'm like, if I went 100 miles on the bike, it'd take me 5 days to recover from that, So I think the duration, like the dosage of what you need as you get older, definitely becomes less. That's where I think knowing exactly what works well for you and what your goals are can be that effectiveness piece, so maybe it's just a 45-minute weightlifting session, and that, that's going to be the most effective thing for you, leave you a little sore so you did something, but not like, oh, I have trouble standing up off the toilet because I did so many squats yesterday kind of thing. In a weird, sick way, I kind of enjoy that here and there. So I still do that occasionally just to make sure, I can still hurt like that. But I think that comes back to one of the strength principles is like, okay, you need that stress adaptation recovery cycle. And so the stress is the exercise, but the adaptation and recovery is when you make the gains from the exercise. So that's, the dosage kind of determines the poison, so to speak. But that's a good one. I like that. I mean, I love talking about exercise stuff too. So, and there's just so many, the way I look at it a lot is people come up to me like, oh man, I heard about this new exercise program and it's Spenga or it's, whatever, give it whatever name, and it's combining all these different things. And I'm like, oh, so it's, it's intervals of different movements done at relatively high intensity with variety. I'm like, okay, yep, that's like covering most of the exercise principles out there. So really what it comes down to is, if you're continuing to confuse your body and you give it that confusion of not only movements, but weight, but intensity, that mixing in a little bit of everything, body weight, external weight loads, getting into different positions, moving through full range of motion, all those things are going to basically make you a better athlete, but they're also going to keep your body in this confusion state where it's trying to continually adapt and recover to these things. It's just like the nutrition. It's like the principles don't change, just the methods. And I mean, as much as I love CrossFit, all Greg Glassman did was take the principles of exercise and put them into a program and then build a community around it and, became a billionaire. So it's cool and it's got a lot of variety to it, but, it's nothing new. It's just something that he kind of packaged together. And, go back to like Taibo or, any of the things that are out there. It's like those were all big because they just took something and packaged it together and, they made it into a pretty cool system of some kind, and people were able to kind of follow it. And that's where I think it's tough too for like everyday people. You just look at the internet and every day there's something new, something different. Oh, you got to try this, and this is the best one ever. And if you don't do this, you're never going to lose weight. And it's like, no, if you're if you're burning calories and you're doing some resistance training and you're moving through full ranges of motion, like, you're covering it. I always just tell people, find stuff they like to do. I mean, if you do not like to lift weights and you're trying to make yourself lift weights 5 days a week, the first chance you get to get out of that program, you're going to be like, oh, look, it's 5 o'clock. I'm not going to lift weights today. And you're just going to blow it off because you just don't want to stick to it. But if it's something you enjoy to some extent, then you're going to be able to kind of keep it in your life and make it a part of your lifestyle. So, somebody today was talking about like doing running intervals and how it burns more fat. And I was like, so you're going to work harder and then that makes you burn more fat? I'm like, oh yeah, you're probably right. Cause you just expended more calories. So you burn more fat, and it's just the way it's the way it's worded that people are like, oh, that burns more fat, like eat more fat. It burns more fat, or do this HIIT training. It burns more fat. And it's like, All right. Anybody else? It was good. I like the interaction. Definitely, I like this style. Keep the presentation relatively short and then be able to just talk about stuff and ask questions. It's definitely way more interactive, but I think more functional for people. Like, hey, I want to ask this question about this, or know why I'm doing this, or why I'm not doing this. So, anybody else? No? Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for spending your time with me. Appreciate it. All right,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank
You bet.
you.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
Yes, thank you, Brent.
Thanks, Brent.
You bet. Thanks for coming.
Little Brad.